First Sergeant Kep here with Company D, 2nd United States Sharpshooters, and today we are talking about a classic 19th century and early 20th century paint finish known as Japanning. And Japanning is something that most of us in the hobby are going to be familiar with, but on very small items that we don't normally pay a lot of attention to. A lot of roller buckles on knapsacks and haversacks, for example, would have been Japanned, and many other items during the 19th century, including the Civil War. Unfortunately, this is one of those things that you can find lots of recipes in 19th century chemistry books, paint books, but making it into a modern, safe, usable recipe has been something that's been puzzling me for quite some time. The other thing that's frustrating about period recipe books is just the sheer volume, the quantity of the mixture that these recipes called for. I'm not trying to supply an entire operation with gallons and gallons and gallons of Japanning. I'm looking for small batches that I can use on small projects and can reasonably expect to use up before it goes bad. Japanning is incredibly durable. Another common place you're likely to see it is in antique hand planes. If they're old enough, early 20th century, late 19th century, and they have the old black paint still on it, odds are that's been Japanned, and also why that paint finish has lasted so long. And the reason is because Japanning is a baked finish. It's kind of like a 19th century powder coat in the fact that you dissolve your ingredients together, you apply it, and you bake it multiple times at varying levels of heat, and then you allow the finish to cure for a full hardness, and then it's good for generations, essentially. There is another form of Japanning known as cold Japanning, in which you mix asphaltum and spar varnish 50-50, and then you can use that for exterior applications. Coating metal roofs was a common idea that you'd find in 19th century paint manuals. So I had been researching this off and on for the last several months and trying to compare and research different recipe books to see how I could take those archaic measurements, subtract the dangerous additives, and make something applicable for today, because there is actually very little available on the internet in any usable form. You can find examples about it, you can find generic articles about it, but as far as a true how-to, that had been non-existent until one of my favorite YouTube channels, Hand Tool Rescue, briefly glossed over the all-important working recipe and baking times. So his recipe is a ratio of 50, 30, 20. So that is 50% turpentine, 30% asphaltum, and 20% boiled linseed oil. For the full ounce measurement breakdown for an 8-ounce batch, be sure to check out our website at secondusss.com, and you'll find a recipe and a write-up to go along with this video. So that was all I needed to get started. I did a little bit of math to find some the right specific measurements. I weighed everything on my postal scale just because it was already in my shop. So that was able to help me get precise measurements. So how do you actually go about making it? Well, the primary and most durable ingredient is going to be powdered asphaltum. Now, powdered, I'm not going to take this out of the can because it is super powdered. It is incredibly dusty and messy. So make sure you cover your work surface and you use spoons. I would probably highly recommend wearing a mask and gloves. It's not like for me, it's not an irritant, but you should be cautious of that too. It just mostly, it's so messy. It's such a fine powder. But asphaltum is what makes Japanning so durable. Asphaltum is powdered tar, and the baking process melts the asphaltum, giving you this tar-like, incredibly dark finish. Here's one I just took out of the second bake of the oven. I'm still, full disclosure, I'm still learning how to apply this. This is not like anything I've ever painted with before. It's really gooey, it's like molasses, and knowing how much to apply, because you also have to figure that the finish is going to go on kind of thick, and then the heat is going to melt the tar, leveling it out. So you kind of have to anticipate it. Mrs. First Sergeant actually had the best way I think of explaining it. It's like melting cheese. So if you're trying to make a grilled cheese sandwich in the microwave, you got to make sure that you don't put too much cheese on it, because then it's going to melt out of the sandwich and make a giant mess in the microwave. So I'm still kind of on that phase. I am getting fewer runs. I do have one down here on the corner, but otherwise it's not too bad. And this is going to, like I said, need to cure for a while, but more on that later. So I got the asphaltum from this art supply store. Not a sponsor, but their prices were affordable and their customer service is really on point. So I've been happy with this. This is a whole pound. I think it was maybe like $25, $30. This will probably last me forever. I just wanted to see how much a pound is, and if someone else in the unit wanted to dabble, I would have some on hand to share with them. So the powdered asphaltum's fairly attainable. It's not too bad to find, but you'll want to do some research. This is the key ingredient to the whole process, and early Ford cars were finished with Japani and made such an incredibly durable finish. So you need to have this. This will probably take you the longest to get. Then you are going to need turpentine to dissolve it. This is like fancy pants, super pure from the proper trees in the South. Turpentine, because I'm working on a less toxic painted cloth recipe on the side right now. So I just use my fancy turpentine, but you can use anything from a hardware store. And then, of course, boiled linseed oil. And then you measure out your ingredients. You mix them together. I use these paint cans you get from, any box store. I feel like, the wider base makes them a little more stable. They seal really well. But a lot of people, if you just have like a mason jar lying around, you could do it that way too. So you take all three ingredients, you measure out your specific ratios properly, and then you mix it. And you mix it really well, and then you have to let it sit for at least 24 hours for the turpentine to sort of absorb and spread out the asphaltum. And then once your finish is ready, you will have a really goopy substance. Let's see if I can get you in here. I mean, this stuff is, it's not like any paint I've ever used. As far as smell, it smells mostly of just the turpentine, and that's sort of the finish that you'll get. I'm sure if you needed to for different applications, you could thin it with a little more turpentine, but this is the result I got from the Hand Tool Rescue recipe, and so far I've been pretty happy with my results. So granted, I don't have a whole lot of experience to really compare and contrast to, but I've been happy with this thick goo quite a bit. So the other thing you're going to need is something to bake it in. You'll see what I have set up here in a little bit later. I just went to Walmart and got a $20 toaster oven, and I use it just for shop projects, and I use it only in my shop. I have tested it with no ventilation. I haven't, I wasn't lingering in here trying to like endanger myself, but I wanted to see how bad it stank up the shop. And the fumes from the baking it's noticeable. It's pretty thick. It mostly smells very strongly of turpentine with a hint of tar. when they're, repaving a road, or someone's working on a roof in your neighborhood or something like that. You kind of get that faint tar smell from the baking, but I definitely would not recommend you do this in your house. I wouldn't bake a Japan finish in something you plan to actually also cook food in. So make sure you have a dedicated way to bake your finish, as well as making sure you have ample and proper ventilation during the baking process. The other thing too I want to be sure to share with you is, because this does contain boiled linseed oil, make sure you are safe and you dispose of anything that came in contact with the BLO Japan finish safely. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm working on just taking this, $2 or $4 metal box I got from a craft store and trying to make it fit in, blend in more with a period correct Japan finish. And it's also a good opportunity for me to practice and continue to learn how to apply this stuff. This is eventually going to be a metal polishing kit for our quartermaster to take care of our loaner gear. I will say the trickiest thing I've encountered so far with Japanning is work holding. So you have to be able to hold it. You can tape stuff, but unlike paint, when you tape something, you can just leave it on your workbench and let it dry. Well, you can't do that. So anything you tape, you have to be able to remove the tape because you have to bake it. You don't want to set the tape on fire. And the other thing too is, if what you're painting goes to the edge, you have to figure out a non-combustible way to lift your workpiece off of the baking sheet that goes in the toaster oven. I found that really big nuts or bolts and some good magnets really help a lot. I put them in a triangle fashion. This one, I'm just painting to this lip, so it shouldn't be an issue because I can still just grab this edge and just plop it on the cookie sheet. So I have cleaned this off with some alcohol to remove any oils, and then it's really important you stir this goop really well so you can hear it on the mic. It's some thick stuff. And I've tried to clean out the mixing cup that I made for this. I used to make this stuff, and it was just an oily, nasty mess. So I wouldn't recommend you use your best brushes. I just bought some cheap chip brushes. I have noticed that these super cheap ones I got will occasionally lose a bristle. And the nice thing is, if you catch it, say maybe you missed it and it's already in the toaster oven, and it's baking. I had this happen last night. I picked it out with a box knife, and the asphaltum just remelted and healed itself. So it's a little bit forgiving. Just pay attention as you go. Yeah, this is sort of 19th century chemistry experimentation at its finest. Because yeah, you're just going to have to figure out how much to put on for your application. And you can see it does, I mean, if you've ever done any roofing jobs or asphalt sealing, you can see it goes on in very much the similar way. And it's not going to look pretty. I mean, this is, so here's, this guy's still curing, so I don't want to manhandle it too much. So this beautiful glossy surface, you can see my face in it, went on like this. So again, it's like melting cheese. This finish really transforms before your eyes. So you just go around and paint your piece, and then we'll be ready to bake. Now that I have my cheap little can painted, I now have it in my dedicated toaster oven set to 250 degrees where it will bake for 1 hour. I will then take it out, let it cool completely, and then bake it again for another hour at 300 degrees. Some of the very few articles out there, the secondary baking temperature does vary a little bit, but they all have in common, don't bake it too hot. And I feel like the number that always comes up is don't go over 350 degrees. I think that has something to do with potentially ruining the finish, but my suspicion is that if you bake it really anything over 300 degrees, you run the risk of potentially hitting a flash point, which would cause a severe fire hazard, of course. So the other thing too, just to make absolutely clear, if you're doing the baked Japan finish, you can only do it on non-combustible items. Anything else that cannot be baked because it would catch on fire, you would need to use the cold Japanning process, where you mix 50-50 asphaltum and spar varnish, allow it to dissolve completely, and then paint it, and then it's kind of ready to go as soon as the varnish dries. Not as durable, but still a lot more additional protection and an equally common 19th century, early 20th century finish. One thing I do want to talk about is I'm still experimenting with all of this. This is one of my favorite aspects of our hobby. It's sort of the experimental archaeology, and I've been kind of on a 19th century chemistry kick recently. So I'm still learning how to do this too, but I figured since so little information exists out there, you would want to know it too. And I was just excited to share my journey learning how to Japan things. An important thing too is this time I applied my lightest coat of the Japanning mixture. My previous attempts have been pretty thick, and I feel like the curing time, I think it's taking longer than it should. So I want to see if a light coat and good quality bakes are going to speed that up and get it harder. Once it's done baking, it's dry to the touch, but it's still kind of a fragile finish, I found. So I'm still in the process of figuring out how long this stuff needs to cure to get that legendary rock hard finish that it's known for. And that brings me to another thing I want to make sure that we all kind of address in the hobby. You'll read a lot on forums about people attempting sort of period recipes that use oxidizing oils. Most commonly like boiled linseed oil, like is in our Japanning mixture, or pure linseed oil, or stuff like walnut oil, anything that oxidizes to cure and polymerize. And they lament it as if it's some horrible burden that they have to bear, and it's not even worth their time. And I get really disappointed when I see those comments, because I feel like that is a lot of modern bias. I feel like we do still have a large culture that requires instant gratification for everything that we make, and that sense that curing just took too long didn't exist in the 19th century. They had a different understanding of time and how they made things based on the materials that were proven effective and that were available to them. So something like painting a ground cloth. Some people complain like, oh, it could take weeks or months for that linseed oil to cure, so it's safe to use. It's like, yeah, so don't make it the day before you need to use it. And the same thing with this. We don't need this anytime soon, and that's why I'm experimenting. So if this does take weeks to fully harden, no big deal. That's one of the glories about our hobby, is that we have a big off season to learn new things, to experiment, and to do more research. So during the 19th century, this sort of stuff didn't take forever. It took as long as it took. And they altered, I mean, it was just part of their life. So I know if I need a ground cloth, or if I need a bunch of stuff Japan, I'm not going to be able to have it ready tomorrow. So I know it's going to take this long for these materials to cure or harden or otherwise be ready. So I just start sooner so that they are ready by the time that I need them. And I feel like one of the great things about doing experimental archaeology like this is that it allows us to kind of reset our modern bias to get a sense of how things worked, how long they took, how hard they were to do. And it's, you know, we get caught up in the sense of drill and uniforms that we forget the other sort of daily details of life and making things and trying to do it the right way. So again, make sure if you do this, you have proper ventilation, you use all good safety practices along every step of the way. Let us know if you have any questions. Thanks as always for your amazing comments. We are truly lucky to have such a great community here on this channel. Thanks for liking and subscribing. And if you want any more details, like my actual 8-ounce recipe, that's available to you on secondusss.com. Thanks as always for watching. We'll see you next time.